Hello, I'm Michael Voris.
And I'm Father Pablo, Catholic missionary priest. We really want you to watch every week the one true faith. Had you left that one true faith, please come home. We're waiting for you because we love you.
Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to The One True Faith. It's the show we say is the most disturbing hour of television because we talk about the truth of Christianity, the truth of authentic Christianity, not what is pretending to be Christianity. If the Catholic Church in her priests and members does not boldly proclaim the truth of Jesus Christ, no one will, because no one has the fullness of that truth except the Catholic Church. Today, not only are hundreds of millions of souls being led astray because they're being taught a false Christianity, but so are many, many, many Catholics likewise being led astray because they too are being taught a false Christianity. Without a miraculous intervention directly in some people's lives by God Himself, there are many souls that are going to wind up in hell. It's just that simple, and that's the truth. I know hell isn't a fashionable word in 21st century America. Whether it's fashionable or not doesn't make it any less true. If the Lord of the universe warned us about hell, then there's something to be warned about. To save humanity from the eternal horrors of hell is the reason Jesus Christ came to earth to establish a church. To live and preach the gospel, to be witnesses. And let me remind you, the word witnesses means martyr. The word means martyr. To be martyrs for this faith is the sole reason Catholics are roaming around on this planet. That's it. But take a look around. Catholics, take a look around and take a good, hard look at our church. The church in America and the church in the West, the Western world. How good a job are we doing witnessing to the authentic Christ? The Christ who wept over Jerusalem because of her unfaithfulness. The Christ who promised that Sodom and Gomorrah would rise up and condemn His chosen ones because of their lack of faithfulness. Our topic today is what happened to the Catholic Church? To ask the question, you first of all have to admit that something happened, that there was a change. And quite frankly, even a corpse could see there's been a change in the Catholic Church in the last 40 or 50 years. Even a corpse could see that. Some of it for the good, absolutely. A lot of it for the bad. A lot of change for the bad. The good can largely be summed up as the response of the faithful clergy and laity to actually fix the bad. That's the good that's come out of the church in the last 40 or 50 years. The bad can be summed up as the ways in which those who are shepherding the souls are shepherding those souls right into hell and away from Christ. And that happens in a lot of different ways. A lot of different ways. So, let's talk about some of them specifically, but let's set the stage. This is something that is kind of a unique period in the Catholic Church. And what I mean by that will become clear as we move on later in the program. Let's go back, let's rewind the clock back about 60 years or so to the 1950s. And let's look at what the Catholic Church was in America in the 1950s and into the 1960s as the decade of the 60s dawned. There were 60,000 priests in the United States at that time. Many of them were young priests. You remember these. Some of you who are perhaps older remember you'd go to the parish and if you'd ask for father, they'd say, which one? And it was Father O'Flanagan, Father Flaherty, Father O'Malley, and there were 20 of them there. You never knew which one. And they were all there for Mass every time. There were 25,000 seminarians in the pipeline, ready to replace them. 60,000 active, mostly young priests with a virtual army of 25,000 there standing in line waiting to become priests themselves, to serve a church that was half the size that it is now. Today, there are 40,000 priests serving as both religious and in parishes, many of them getting on up there in years. Matter of fact, the average age is near 60, and their replacements are nowhere to be seen. Today, there are 5,000 seminarians in the United States. 5,000. Who's going to replace them? What happened to the Catholic Church? In 1950, there were 180,000 nuns in habits in the United States. 180,000 nuns, many of them young, their orders thriving, respected. Today, there are 70,000 nuns. 70,000 nuns. A loss of more than half in less than half a century. Not in their habits, and rapidly advancing towards death. In fact, of those 70,000 nuns, 65,000 of them are over 50, and half of them are over 70. And there are almost no replacements for them. What happened to the Catholic Church? But the devastation is not confined to the clergy and the religious. In the 1950s and into the decade of the 1960s, 75%, 3 out of every 4 Catholics faithfully attended Mass every Sunday. Over half of them received Holy Communion. Today, 1 in 4 Catholics attends Mass every Sunday. And virtually all of them receive Holy Communion. What happened to the Catholic Church? The devotional life of lay people went straight out the stained glass windows. The sacramental life, especially the sacrament of confession, was sacrificed for a newer, hipper, cooler way of being Catholic. Catholics, in short, began to look like every other American they were standing around. Personal sin was no longer our problem. Social injustice, that's the horrible thing in the world. Poverty, let's fight poverty. Social injustice. Institutionalized sin, because it's not personal, it's easy to rail against it. But when it comes to personal sin, well, we don't believe in that anymore. That's that medieval stuff. If there is no personal sin, there is no need for sacraments. If there's no need for sacraments, there's no need for the Blessed Sacrament, the Holy Eucharist. If there's no need for the Blessed Sacrament, there's no need for priests or clergy. And if there's no need for priests, why are we so shocked that there are so few? What we should be shocked about is that there are any at all. What happened to the Catholic Church? All of this in the space of 2 generations. And in the 1950s, the church was this, in America, was this bright and glorious topic of articles and discussions. They used to make movies about the Catholic Church. Bing Crosby was Father O'Malley. Ingrid Bergman may as well have been a nun. Where'd that all go? Oh, they make movies about the Catholic Church now. Oh, they make movies about the Catholic Church, without a doubt. But it's no Father O'Malley. And based on what you read quite often, the name of the movie should not be Going My Way. It should be Going Their Way. There were 2 watershed events in the 1960s that first destabilized the church in the West, predominantly in America, but also in Western Europe, and then just shook her to her foundations. We'll talk about the first one. The 1960s, many of us, myself, if we were alive, born in 61, don't remember lots of this stuff. We've just seen it on old newsreels and looked through old magazines, but I've seen enough to know kind of what it was like. It was a time of massive social upheaval. John F. Kennedy was assassinated. There was the drug culture. Remember Haight-Ashbury? Remember go to San Francisco, start a whole new life, make love with anybody, anyone you want, as often as you want, as many times as you can in a night, do a little drug trip, lay on the sidewalk, wake up the next morning and do it all again. And we call this love. This is a revolution. There was the Vietnam War and all the ensuing protests about that. There was the global advance of communism. Everywhere, all over the world, communism was advancing on every front. The hippie movement. The sexual revolution with emphasis on the word revolt in more ways than one. Change and rebellion were in the air, most likely carried on the wings of demons. Into this social chaos stepped the Catholic Church, not wanting to hear all of this, not wanting to pay attention to this, but looking to a bright, uplit the uplands of a beautifully lit future, that here was a world in pain that needed evangelizing, that needed the gospel brought to it. We have that gospel. We have that truth. We will step into this. We will step out into the modern world, and we will convert it. We will convert it. That was the halcyon. Those were the halcyon days as the Second Vatican Council convened in Rome in 1962. In his opening speech to that council, Pope John the 23rd said, "We intend to assert once again the Church's teaching authority, which is unfailing and lasts until the end of time." That doesn't sound particularly wildly like much of a change to me. We intend to assert the Church's teaching authority, which is unfailing and lasts until the end of time. He said, he went on, "The problem facing us is the same it has always been. Men either stand with the Church or they reject her." These are the words of the Pope, of Pope John the 23rd, as he convened that council in St. Peter's Basilica. Men either stand with the Church or they reject her. He continued, "Our greatest concern is that the sacred deposit of Christian doctrine be safeguarded and taught more effectively." Now, for many people who have not read the documents of Vatican II, you're hearing this and going, well, gee, that sure sounds like a pretty conservative pope to me. That doesn't sound like some wild, reckless, let's change everything in the church. Matter of fact, if you read the documents of Vatican II, you'll find them just as little more updated language, but it sounds very much like the Council of Trent 500 years earlier. He said that there was already sufficient clarity with regard to what the church taught. So this council was called so that we could focus on how to teach this sterling truth that we have. That was the purpose of Vatican II. Vatican II, so therefore, was not to be a doctrinal council because there were no doctrinal issues that had been raised. It was to be a pastoral council. How do we shepherd our people into a greater awareness of this truth so that they, the laity, along with the teachers in the church, can go out and convert the world? No wonder there were such noble thoughts and such high spirits as Vatican II convened. There were, however, plenty of others who were gathered there who did not have that agenda. That was not their agenda. After the council ended in 1965, some theologians began peddling a phrase which has become notorious. The phrase was the spirit of Vatican II. The spirit of Vatican II. If you've ever been involved with a parish council meeting or a wild-eyed liturgist or music who always and starts doing some wacky thing, and you're going, why? What's this? They'll say, it's the spirit of Vatican II. Really? Really? Funny, the documents of Vatican II never mention the spirit of Vatican II. Under this banner of the spirit of Vatican II, many of these people seized on the outward changes of the church, and they were. The Mass changed from Latin to the vernacular of the, wherever, culture you were in. But in doing that, because Catholics are sitting in the pews here, looking, and things are changing. Things are starting to move a little bit. This grandma used to take me to look the same, and then my parents took me to look the same, and now I grew up and this looked the same. Whoa, what's going on here? This is all different. What's going on? Using that kind of unsteadiness of many Catholics sitting in the pews, some of these people launched an attack, or better stated, a series of attacks, a steady stream to attack the church herself. They were able to do this through allies they had in the media, who always sided with the anti-institutional crowd. Always. There were religious, priests, nuns, brothers, who, for whatever reason, felt oppressed by their vows. Here was a way to get out of them. The spirit of Vatican II says, I don't have to do this anymore. I don't have to pray my breviary anymore. I can go on vacations. I can go golfing. I can spend time taking care of this social club meeting here. Prayer is such a drudgery. Oh, thank God for the spirit of Vatican II. We're so grander now. These people would get their chance to totally dismantle the church in 3 years. To the average Catholic sitting in the pew, things were different. We have to remember that. Things looked different. Almost overnight, the Mass took on a whole different look. Didn't even look like the same thing. Reliable estimates say that nearly 10 million Catholics walked out of the Catholic Church immediately in the wake of Vatican II because of the changes. And I'm sure we all know some of them. Together with their allies in the media, this crowd who published practically, the media published practically every word that fell from these people's lips, like it had come down from Mount Sinai itself. These theologians, and there were many of them, set about setting themselves up as an almost rival teaching authority. When Rome would announce something, they would say, well, that needs to be reviewed. We need to clarify that. We need to take that under study, and then we'll tell you what the Pope really means by that, because we're so smart. This is how the average Catholic, in a media-rich environment, found out their teachings about the Catholic Church. Before television news and before radio news and all this, Catholics got their teaching. Catholics got their teachings from Father. And of course Father would know all this, because that's what Father went to seminary for. So if Father says it, that's what the case is, right? Right. During the mid-1960s, most Catholics knew, thanks to the media, that the Church was studying the issue of artificial contraception, artificial birth control. It was in every major paper on a regular basis. Because the council ended in 1965, and this pronouncement, this document, did not come out until 1968, there was a 3-year gap in which people, and the much anticipated response was the church is going to flip its teaching on artificial birth control. And everybody was saying that. Everybody was saying that. Remember before the Gore-Bush 2000 presidential election, every poll you saw beforehand, Gore's going to win, Gore's going to win, Gore's going to win, oh yeah, Gore's going to win. And then all of a sudden, when all this whole thing was over, it's like, Bush won? Wait, he won the Electoral College vote? Really? It was that kind of stunning thing, except on a theological level, a spiritual level. And why shouldn't the Catholic Church overturn this ban? After all, every Protestant denomination had already done it. Starting in 1930, one by one, they all did it. And by 1960, they'd all said, oh, this artificial birth control, it's perfectly fine. So why shouldn't the Catholic Church do it? Every other church had done it. So the word went out unofficially that a change was coming. There are professional theologians who staked their careers on this change happening. Seminarians and newly ordained priests were taught in seminary, this is going to be changing. It's going to be changing. So what do they pass on to Catholic couples who are coming to them? Well, this is what the teaching was, but we're very much anticipating that there's going to be a change, so this is okay. And that's what all the Catholics in the United States were hearing. This is the environment in which this happened. Word leaked out from the Vatican, as a matter of fact. Interesting, whoever we find out how that word leaked out. Word leaked out from the Vatican that there was the committee that was advising the Pope personally, that a majority of them had recommended to him that he overturn the ban. Everywhere, the ground had been tilled, ready to receive the news that the Pope was going to say artificial birth control was okay. For years, this was in people's minds. Every Protestant denomination had done it. All of your friends and neighbors were practicing birth control. Their ministers in the pulpit were saying, that's fine. But Catholicism is not Protestantism. The truths of the Catholic Church are not dependent on what the consensus or the majority of the people say, or what every theologian in the entire world thinks about something. The morning papers on July 25th, 1968, carried a headline in the United States that said, "The Pope says no to artificial birth control." Hell was about to break loose in the Catholic Church. And we'll talk about this when we come right back. Our key date here is July 25th, 1968. That's the day that Pope Paul VI issued his encyclical, which means letter, entitled Humanae Vitae. It's Latin for human life. In that letter, in that encyclical, he restated Catholic Church position that had been unbroken for centuries and centuries and centuries, and that is that within the context of marriage, sex must be open to the transmission, to the possibility of transmission of new life. He said nothing new that had been stated for centuries and centuries before. The position did not change. The next 2 weeks in 1968 proved to be the moment that when we say what happened in the Catholic Church, it's these 2 weeks that we have to look at. They could aptly be described, as a matter of fact, as the time that the wheels came off the wagon. Shock over this was soon replaced with dismay, then anger, then a massive public relations campaign on the part of those who said the Pope is wrong. Theologians, again, remember, who had staked their reputations on this. They had gone on radio, on TV, been interviewed, written articles, published these articles in not just private, quiet little, theological reviews that no one had ever heard of, the average man on the street had never heard of. They were on television, they were on radio saying, oh, absolutely the Pope will change, and I'm smart enough to know why, and here's all the reasons why. They looked stupid, and they knew it. So they either had to backpedal and say, I was wrong in humility, or they had to say, the Pope is wrong. Within hours of that news being coming out of Rome, and the encyclicals weren't made and distributed yet, within hours, 100 theologians took out an ad in the New York Times saying the Pope was wrong. About a week and a half later, another 100 joined them, and they republished the ad. 200 Catholic theologians in the U.S. saying the Pope got it wrong. The last time that happened, there was a Reformation. But open rebellion against the Vicar of Christ was not exactly the weapon that they wanted to use. Not exactly. Because while the church had been sort of primed for this kind of turmoil, it wasn't exactly ready to just throw the Pope off the ship. And they knew that. They sharpened some of these weapons, and they came back with a tactic that is incredibly subtle and very effective. Here's what the tactic is. If you are a dissenting theologian, in other words, if you disagree with the Pope on a teaching, you, as the authority, because you're the guy that has all the contacts to CBS and ABC and Newsweek and Time and the New York Times and the Washington Post and the LA Times, all you have to do is give one interview and your message goes out to millions and millions of people. The Pope, well, he's kind of irrelevant. You know, that poor little old man in the white dress over there. God bless him, isn't he sweet? He's a wonderful figurehead, but I really know what I'm talking about, so interview me. That's the attitude. These people would say, their tactic is to put a label on the church's teaching, and the label was official. So when the theologians who disagree with the church and disagree with the Pope want to appear respectful, they call this teaching, the Pope's teaching, the official teaching of the church. The implication's clear that there's some other kind of teaching over here that's actually, the kind of real, this is where we all really hang out, we're all good with each other. Yeah, well, this is how we're all Catholics over here. The Pope, nice dress. Great hat. Love your museums. That's the official teaching, but here's the unofficial. This is where we all live. They set up this plan, this goal, and put it into motion to essentially set up two different authorities in the church. The official teaching of the church, which they would all bow down to and show their reverence to and everything else, and then as soon as they got out of the room, rip it apart behind its back. They have done a pretty effective job, actually, of reaching into the hands of Peter and taking out those keys that Christ put there. On the practical, effective, day-to-day, where Catholics live, that is what has happened. That tactic was used time and again, and still is today. With regard to the letter on birth control, theologians got on TV, radio. If they had internet, they'd have done that too. They're on the internet now. Newspapers, all over the world. And here's the kind of things they said. Catholics should take the Pope's teaching very seriously. They should carefully consider it. They should pray over it. They should read the letter. And they should read it loyally. But, if after all of this careful consideration, after being good sons and daughters of the church and weighing this, they simply cannot agree with it, then they should follow their own conscience. Does that sound familiar? Does that sound familiar? John Kerry, Ted Kennedy, Catholic politicians who support abortion, sound familiar? This was their blueprint, and it's worked like a charm ever since. How many lay Catholics, or for that matter, how many theologians, have ever actually read the Pope's letter? See, they knew that they could get around with this whole Spirit of Vatican II thing, because how many Catholics are going to pick up the 16 documents, which are 800 pages, and sit here and read the teachings of the church? How many of you have read this? They know you haven't. They know most of you haven't. That's the point. You don't have to pay attention to this. We'll sum this up for you. Wrong. And we'll tell you what you should believe, what we say, because we've grabbed those keys out of Peter's hand. They knew most Catholics wouldn't read the letter either. 40 years later, most Catholics still haven't read the letter. So when they proposed that people read this and make up their minds, they were being dishonest, and they knew it. What they really meant was, you choose between the Pope and us. That's what they meant. Because unless you are a sophisticated theologian reading through very lofty theological language, which almost none of us have any kind of training in, you're going to get done with this if you got done and go, okay, well, yeah, whatever you say, Pope, what he says. Because we don't know what this means. You can choose, and here's how they parse this. You can choose the official teaching of the church, or you can choose the teaching that's proposed by us, because it's practical, and it's simpler, and it's easier. Satan himself could not have said it better. What happened to the Catholic Church is this: a rival authority inside the church set itself up as a pope and professes itself to be smarter than the pope. It's sort of an anti-pope operating inside the church. John Paul called it the anti-church. And don't make the mistake looking for these folks down at like a Jehovah's Witness temple, Kingdom Paul. That's not where they are. It's not where they are. Over the course of the decades since Vatican II, these folks have sort of encrusted themselves and institutionalized this dissent. And where are you going to find them? You'll find them in Catholic universities and Catholic colleges, on the theology faculties. You'll find them in seminaries, on seminary staffs. You'll find them in chancery offices. You'll find them all over the Catholic world, purporting to be Catholic and very much dressing themselves up on the outside as Catholic, but inside they're dissidents. Dissident theologians who have the backing of many clergy and many lay people who do not want to accept the teaching of Jesus Christ in His church. 500 years before, they left the church. Today we call them Protestants. In 1960, 65, and 1970, they stayed in the church. And we're going to call them what they are: heretics. They are heretics. Before Henry VIII lopped off Thomas More's head, somebody said to Thomas More, "You know, Thomas, you use that word heresy a lot. You know, it's not a nice word." And Thomas More responded, "It's not a nice word. No, it's not a nice word. It's not a nice thing." Heresy destroys the unity of the body of Christ. But make no mistake about it, heresy is alive and well, even though you don't hear the word. We don't hear the word very much today because it's not a nice word. People don't say that in mixed company anymore. Heresy, oh God, what is he? Probably wants to bring back the Inquisition. Canon law defines heresy like this: the obstinate denial or doubt after baptism of a truth which must be believed with divine and Catholic faith. That's from canon law, the official teaching of the church. And no matter how much a theologian wants to come and knock that down, well, it's not really heresy. See, when you take the Greek word and you move it over here and you reverse the Latin, it really means do whatever the hell you want. The Catechism of the Catholic Church calls it a sin against faith and therefore a sin against the first commandment. You shall have no other gods but me. These dissenting theologians, properly known as heretics, have staked out their ground very well. They've assumed a rather novel teaching role unto themselves. The Pope will declare a teaching, and then they will tell you why he is wrong and they are right. And this happens all the time. If you ever watch a television newscast and you see a priest sitting there with his collar on, which is probably the only time you'll ever see his collar on, because that gives him, he gets to hide behind the official church and look all churchy, and he will then tear the church's teachings to shreds. He's one of them. I went to Notre Dame. I was taught by a number of these guys. I know exactly what I'm talking about. Dissent, heresy, has become institutionalized in the church. It has become institutionalized. It is part of the fabric and the makeup of the church today. Not of the official church, not of the deposit of faith, not of the purity that Jesus Christ left us, but of the anti-church, which has secretly wedded itself into the church with the one goal of destroying it, because it does not want to accept the teachings of Almighty God. Shouldn't be so surprising, should it? Shouldn't be so surprising. Isn't this like the tactic that's gone on even with humans forever? Remember the Trojan horse? These guys haven't come up with anything new, but they are the Trojan horse of modern day Catholicism. They absolutely are. You'll find them everywhere. Just listen to what they say. We all know friends who've been counseled by priests that artificial birth control is okay. It's all right. You should read the documents. Here, read the documents, and when you wake up, make sure that you prayerfully consider them, and then you be your own God. You make up your own mind. When it comes to the truths of God, we don't get to make up our mind. Well, we do, but there's a consequence for it. Many lay Catholics today hear these deficient voices. People who go to RCIA who want to come into the church are taught this watered-down garbage as faith, as what the teachings of the faith are. It's not the faith. It's not even the Catholic faith. I'm not even sure half the time it's even Christian faith. What many Catholics face today, probably without even knowing it, is this dilemma of conscience. They must choose between this authority or that authority. Both of them purporting to be the same. This one doing everything it can to subtly subvert this one. You can be sure that if you choose the Pope and his teachings, that your life is probably going to be difficult because of your choice. You get that clue from when Jesus said, if you love me, you will follow me, pick up your cross and follow me daily. It's kind of the hint there that life's not going to be so great down here, but you will make heaven. Follow the other group, follow the heretics, and you'll have an easy time. You'll even get to stand around and laugh at all those good ones over there carrying their cross, and you'll roast in hell forever. Christ said that, not me. And you don't have to take my word for it. The book of Revelations, chapter 21, verse 8 says, "For cowards, the unfaithful and deceivers of every sort, their lot is the burning pool of fire and sulfur, which is the second death." That's God saying that. You can throw stones at me, you can call up here, you can write nasty letters to me all you want. I'm not changing my opinion because it's not my opinion. This is God's opinion. And it's more than an opinion, it's a command. I am the Lord your God. You will love me first and foremost. I will send my Son. He's establishing his church so that and he will die for that church so that you can have eternal life. It's that simple. Choose, and we all have to, choose God in his teachings as voiced by the Pope, or choose the anti-church. Your eternal life is in the balance. Choose wisely. We'll be back with some questions right after this. Hello and welcome back to The One True Faith. We're taking questions from the studio audience now on what happened to the Catholic Church. Hello, sir. What's your name and where are you from?
Ed from Lapeer, Michigan.
Hello, Ed. What's your
Immaculate
question?
Conception. Why did we start holding hands and teaching our children to cross the aisles to do the same during Mass at the Our Father?
What you're touching on is really one of the areas of change that happened a lot, change in the liturgy. There was the legitimate change in the liturgy that was sanctioned by Vatican II, and then it didn't take very much time after that for liturgists, many of them, to start getting their hands on Mass and improvising it and making their own things and all of this. Here's the thing about the Second Vatican Council and Mass, and specifically with these kinds of changes, and I heard this from the mouth of Cardinal Arinze himself when he was here in Detroit for breakfast a few months ago. He said, while it is improper to be holding hands during the Our Father, there are so many other things that are going on that are bad that they warrant our attention more. The reason we should not be holding hands during the Our Father is that, one, it is a change in the Mass that was not approved by the Church, the Universal Church. Number two, it's kind of a pagan custom to stand around and hold hands, especially in some kind of circle-y type thing. And third, while it's meant to be a nice little expression of unity and all of that, our unity as Catholics is receiving the body and blood of Jesus. That's what expresses our unity, not some outward sign of holding hands. Thank you, Ed. Hi, what's your name and where are you from?
Hi, Mike. I'm Joan from Sterling Heights.
Hi, Joan.
Hi. Was the commission to study contraception endorsed by the Pope, and why?
No, it was not. A majority of the people on the committee recommended to the Pope that he change the teaching, but after and in his role as Vicar of Christ, as the primary teacher in the Church, after reflection and prayer and all of the other steps that he went through as Pope, he thanked the committee for its work and decided that their recommendation was not in keeping with the ancient faith, and pronounced in his encyclical Humanae Vitae that artificial birth control would remain forbidden for Roman Catholics.
So they actually just did that on their own?
Well, no, it was set up by the Pope. It was actually set up by Pope John the 23rd. He didn't want that issue being part of the Second Vatican Council, so he had a committee set up sort of while the Second Vatican Council was doing its work on all of these documents. This committee was doing its work separately, but a majority of the committee did recommend that the Church abandon its teaching on that, and that's the sort of language that makes popes and God very nervous to hear abandon a teaching. So,
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. What's your name and where are you from?
I'm April from Detroit.
Hi, April. What's your question?
How can a person with limited knowledge know when their catechist is a heretic, and what can they do to find reliable teaching?
One of the same answer to both questions. One of the great things that John Paul the Great did was publish a catechism, and where you now no longer have to sort of go to a person who you don't know what their philosophical, theological bent is. You can go straight to that catechism, and it's pretty easy reading. It's not a lot of lofty theological concepts. Essentially, that's the first place I would recommend anyone start. The rest of it is, obviously you should pray. If something seems weird to you, ask. You're a Catholic. You're a layperson. You're baptized. You're confirmed. You have a right to know the truth. You have a right to demand the truth. Ask what the truth is. If the person's answer doesn't sit right with you, find out why, ask them more, and then if something is just obviously not, then just leave and go somewhere else.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, what's your name and where are you from?
My name's Mary and I'm from Madison Heights.
Hi, Mary, what's your question?
What is our duty as Catholics faithful to the teaching authority of the Pope to correct or question our priests when we hear heresy being preached or practiced at Mass?
First of all, love. Always love. This is not a competition or we're going to beat you up. It's not that sort of thing. Oh, at least not on the side of the authentic faith. It's not. Everything is done in charity. We want these people to go to heaven. We want to go to heaven. We want everybody that can possibly go to heaven to be in heaven. However, when somebody is preaching or counseling or whatever verb you want to use, something that is going to help take people away from heaven, you have a duty to say something. You have a duty to make the truth known. If you are met with obstinance and shut down and whatever, you've done what you can do. I mean, you shouldn't go firebomb the church or anything. I mean, you've done what you can do. You've said the truth, and what you've done is you defended Christ. And since you defended him, he will defend you. But yeah, this time of Catholics sitting in the pews being quiet when some sort of horrible thing is going on has come to an end. There's way too much crazy stuff going on to sit there and be quiet. So yeah, you say something, you make your thoughts known, and then and you pray. Hopefully, what you say, because you've said it in charity, will have a good effect, and begin to make other people change and think and feel and understand that things aren't the way they should be. If it doesn't, well, we can't do everything.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, what's your name? Where are you from?
I'm Frank from Dearborn Heights. My question is that one of the things I've noticed, probably the biggest problem I've noticed, is a lack of reverence for the Blessed Sacrament and for the church in general, the sacredness of a church. Is this a symptom of the problem or a contributing cause?
Probably both. Probably both. These things sort of tend to feed each other. The more you are disrespectful to the Eucharist, the more it reinforces other people around you to be disrespectful. And there was a time, years ago when you were just walking down the street, if you were Catholic and you crossed the center line of a Catholic church, you'd stop and reverence it and make the sign of the cross and say a little prayer and be on about your business. There are people in church now, we've all seen them, who you wouldn't even know they're in a church. They might as well be in a basketball arena or something. The answer to that is you be reverent. You be reverent, you pray, you do everything you should do, and the same way that their bad example helps steer other people off, perhaps your good example will help bring them back. But we should all be genuflecting. That's Jesus Christ on the altar. You're going to spend eternity with him, probably on your knees, I would think. You should at least be able to, get one knee bent for 2 seconds while you're here on earth. And it's probably a symptom, and it's also probably a cause. These things tend to feed each other.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll be right back with some closing thoughts right after this. Hello, and welcome back to the One True Faith. We're talking about what happened to the Catholic Church, particularly in the United States, since this is where we live. I'd like to make a personal appeal to anyone watching right now or listening who thinks that he or she is more knowledgeable than the Catholic Church on any teaching that it has, especially if you are a priest or a religious or you have some sort of charge of souls, like you're an RCIA director or you're a catechism teacher or you are on a parish council, anything like that. I'd like to caution you that in many cases you've put aside the weapons of holiness. You've put aside the weapons of humility and charity and prayer. As a fellow Catholic, as a brother Catholic, I'd like to ask you to pick that weapon up again. All it takes is a simple word. That's all. As Jesus told us, there will be more joy in heaven over one repentant sinner than, well, hopefully you know the rest. Now, you may have talked yourself out of a belief in hell because the choices you've made in your life demand that you do that. But you haven't talked God out of it. Hell still exists. Ask yourself this question: if Christ is our Savior, what did He come to save us from? And in your heart of hearts, you know the answer to that question. Please admit to yourself that your pride and your desire to remain in sin is what holds you back, just like it did me for 20 years. Give up your pretended allegiance that you have to your own conscience and your own authority. Stop leading the people of God astray by rationalizing and failing to preach the truth boldly. Christ gave those keys to Peter. You give those keys back and enter into the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. God bless you.
Oh